Hello everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Good afternoon, good evening, that's the correct order, depending on where you are throughout the world. My name is Kamil Gungol. I am working for the European Network on Independent Living, and I am also the chair of the EDF Youth Committee and a member of the IDA Youth Committee. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to this Global Disability Summit on Youth side event on mental health and youth with disabilities. Before we continue, let me briefly explain the housekeeping rules so everyone is on the same page and clear. And yeah, in case I forget something, please, the colleagues from IDA, don't hesitate to interrupt me in any given moment. So we welcome you to the Youth with Disabilities and Mental Health session, which is part of the Global Disability Youth Summit, as we said. This is co-hosted by the International Disability Alliance, the Atlas Alliance, through Youth Mental Health Norway, UNICEF, and supported by the government of Norway. Now I will explain some features of today's webinar in case they are useful for you. So the webinar will be recorded. There is international sign language interpretation, language interpretation in English, in French, and in Arabic, and captioning in English. A CC button on your screen will enable the captions. If you need captions in a different window, a link should be provided in the chat box by one of our colleagues. I will wait a couple of seconds for everyone to enable the language of your choice through the options at the bottom of your screen. There will be also an option to mute original audio. Please do not select this option. If you do, you might miss some parts of the audio, which is of course not what we want. So let's take 10 seconds so you can select the language of your choice. Okay. I suppose we are done with that. Now, should you have any questions for panelists, kindly use the Q&A option or leave your questions in the chat box. Our team is monitoring both, and we will try to respond to questions in the course of the event where possible. We hope to have time for questions, but depending on the time, we might need to skip some and not address everything. Please note, we cannot put cameras on for participants due to the limitations of the platform. If time is an issue, as I said, priority will be given to live answering questions that are relevant to the discussions which have been presented. Should you have any accessibility issue, please send a private message to the host account on Zoom or email webinars@ida-secretariat.org. I will repeat it again. The email address, it's webinars@ida-secretariat.org. And the team will try and resolve to the best of their ability. We hope that you will not have any issues. But yeah, this is what happens sometimes when in online environments. Finally, we request all speakers to kindly try to keep the times and to ensure that they speak slow enough. This applies also for me, which I'm not sometimes doing it. So first of all, I say it to myself. For the slowly enough for the interpreters and captioners to follow, and for the audience as well. We would like to thank the logistics and communication teams of the International Disability Alliance for their hard work. And believe me, they work at the weekend and all this period. So yeah, big respect to them. And for the consideration in enabling the participation of all of us here today. So, having said that, I don't want to take much of your time because, yeah, this session is not for me, but it's about our great speakers today. Believe me, we will have some really wonderful inputs, which I'm really looking forward. Just very brief comment. We are discussing about mental health and youth with disabilities, and we believe that the topic of mental health nowadays is more relevant and more important than ever. Pandemic also highlighted it even more, and more people realize that this is a thing. So, and yeah, I'm happy that this is not a taboo anymore, and we are in a position to discuss it. And I'm also very happy to see that we have more than 180 participants, and this is growing. So, yeah. And now I will give the floor to the first speaker, Antonio Ferreira from UK, an activist, a very strong activist. I think that it's better each of the speakers introduce themselves very briefly, since you can say whatever you want about yourselves instead of me saying, a typical, just read the bios. So yeah, Antonio, please introduce yourself and yeah, begin with your introductory statement for the event. Thank you.
Thank you and hello everyone. So I am Antonio Ferreira. I'm a 24-year-old student studying psychology and cognitive neuroscience. Outside of that, I'm also a mental health activist who campaigns for anti-racism within the mental health space. And I use my lived experience to offer and shed hope to other young Black men who experience mental illnesses. As a teenager, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia and emotionally unstable personality disorder. And it was a very lonely experience because there wasn't, I guess, representation in that space at the time. And so I tried to address that by offering my lived experience for others to hear and find hope in. And I guess that gives into the essence of what the issues I wanted to bring to light, which were cultural competency and representation.
Thank you, Antonio. So I will move now to our second speaker. This is Hannah Hodgson, if I pronounce it correctly. I'm not perfect with names, so please, all of you, excuse me. And Hannah has also a very rich and active bio. Again, I will leave you, Hannah, to introduce yourself and yeah, give your first statement for the session. Thank you.
So, my name is Hannah. I am a writer and also an activist, and I live with mitochondrial disease, which is a terminal illness. So I have had kind of my chronic illness life, physical and my mental health life crossover, because a very common thing with mitochondrial disease is bipolar disorder, and I do have that. So I got diagnosed with that at the start of the pandemic, and a lot of things were coming into play. I was, I've been writing this whole time, but really that's only ever a sticking plaster, rather than actual therapy. And pre-pandemic, I would have said, oh no, it's therapy. It's not therapy. But I think it is very good at getting a message across. So that's my day job. And So, and I also use a hospice and have those things. And I noticed a real shift during the pandemic, which led me to create an online space for other young people, which was that within a number of months, I went from my doctor saying, I want to write a paper on you, to you won't get a ventilator if we're short. So that was a real realization in my mind, and a shift. So I've been writing about that a lot, and yeah, that is me.
Thanks a lot, Hannah. Thank you for sharing this first thoughts and introducing yourself. So before I go to Clementine, I would like to say that I love really your balance of colors, guys. We have blue, yellow, red, dark color. I think it's black if I say it well. So a little bit of everything. This gives a nice view to, a visual view to the panel. So now I will go to Clementine Willow Duvandans, and I'm sorry if I pronounce it too. Not very perfectly. It's the Dutch. It's always the Dutch language. It's always challenging. And yeah, Clementine, welcome. Please introduce yourself. And yeah, feel free to do the first statement of the day for you.
Yeah, just introducing, right? Like not the whole thing.
Introducing, and you can say also your first part of the statement you have prepared.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. My name is Clementine Willow Doevendans. And it's fine that you didn't pronounce it well. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm 26. I'm an educator, activist, lobbyist, and writer. And my expertise lays really in ableism, saneism, healthyism, and autism. But today I'm going to talk about saneism because it's about mental health. And I think when we talk about mental health, we always have to include saneism because it's the systematic oppression and systematic discrimination of people with mental disability. Yeah, should I start?
Yes, of course, thank you.
Okay, so I wrote it down because I just had Corona and it had a very much impact on my brain. So I wrote it down, so I'm just going to read it out loud. And I hope that it's understandable for everyone. Okay, so when we have a conversation about mental health, how it affects our individual lives, our works, the many or less loves we share with each other or alone, we cannot leave the system saneism out of it. Saneism is the systematic oppression and systematic discrimination of people with mental disabilities, learning difficulties, and neurodivergency. Saneism is as old as the time of Sparta, 431, 404 BC, and probably even stems from prehistoric times as researchers found remains of medical testing and genocides done on a specific group of people, and was always one of the driving systems during history. With such a rich history as saneism has, the prejudice, oppression, and discomfort we experience is still embedded in society today. Unfortunately, I cannot explain every aspect of it and cannot go in depth historically wise due to lack of time, but please feel free to contact me after or do some research yourself. Nowadays, saneism is still troubling our society, but the way it does differs from country and country. In general, the accessibility, mental health, and the general understanding and acceptance of mentally disabled people has still a long way to go. Still, we make up more than 1/3 of the victims of police brutality in America, and similar high percentages in many other countries. The mental health care faces financial cuts every year, and the waiting lists are so long that they have to refuse clients. When people think about criminals, they think about the mentally ill. Prisons don't have any knowledge how to deal with depression or suicidal thoughts, and sometimes even in mental institutions themselves, this knowledge lacks. When you make a little mistake, you call yourself stupid or dumb. And when you don't act in the norm, you are called crazy, even if it's in a funny, quote unquote, funny or meant to be kind way. In 1883, Sir Francis Galton coined eugenics, which in short is a pseudoscience of creating the perfect human beings and limiting the less desired based on productivity in society. In the development of this way of thinking, Galton and Paul Broca were also interested in ways to specify people based on intelligence and enforcing ways of dealing with those people accordingly based on their findings, leading to genocides and forced sterilizations on disabled people. Later, in 1904, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon, Later in 1904, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon came up with the IQ test we know today. Even though this time around it was not used in the same way, it was still used for the medical testing to divide and to criminalize people with mental disabilities. Psychiatrists not that long ago still used the medical classification based on IQ. Even my mom, born in 1955, told me many years ago that she also was taught this medical classification in her school. It went as followed. With an IQ of 0 to 25, they were classified as an idiot. 26 to 50, they were an imbecile. 51 to 75, they were a moron. Even though the medical classification as stated above is something from our past, we always have to remember it and spread the knowledge of where some terms come from, and especially how much they still do divide. For example, when someone is going to a regular school now and gets an IQ test or exam to determine their future education, it immediately divides them and their schoolmates in sections of practical and theoretical educational systems. And while it's really logical to provide education fitted on people, their interests, needs, and abilities, the emphasis lays too much on the idea that we have to get rewarded for how smart we are and our ability to perform. How higher your education, the better your career. And career creates money, which gives you status in return. So with that, disabled people and others who don't fit in the system and don't get the same chances and opportunities from the start will never get the same rewards. And that makes it a systematic. So while sanism affects neurodivergent people with learning disabilities and mental disabilities obviously the most, it's so much ingrained in society that it affects us all and leaves marks on how we treat ourselves and others based on the behaviors we seem as the norm. So that's why we should always keep history and the system that started it all in mind and in our actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Clementine. It was very clear, and I'm happy you won your fight against COVID and you are here with us today. And they gave this a strong first intervention. So Antonio, we start with you. Please give us your introductory speech for today, and then we go to Hannah. Thank you both.
Thank you for giving us the floor again. And yeah, like I said, so what I wanted to touch on was cultural competency, which this space now is probably the best place to speak of it, and also representation. And I say the two because, in the decade that I've had in mental health services, from child to adult services, cultural competency is something that really spotted out to me as I analyzed that whole journey that I went through in the mental health services, And when I say cultural competency, I don't mean, we need to have more Black therapists or, more Black practitioners. That is not what I mean. Cultural competency means that someone from a white background can also understand my culture as a Black male. I went through many therapists in cognitive behavioral therapy, and not all were from a Black background, not all were from an African background, not all were from a Caribbean background. Some of them were from white backgrounds, and actually what I learned is that I gained a lot from each person that I met as a therapist, from each background they were from. And, that's where I became to understand there's always two sides to a story, and that representation actually is, I guess, having more cultures in a space and I guess representation allows people to not isolate, because I believe, and again, emphasis on I believe, is that people isolate because they feel no one understands what they're going through. And that is, I guess, the importance of representation. However, separating or differentiating cultural competency and representation is the fact that actually you shouldn't feel the need to only pair me with a Black therapist. I should feel comfortable speaking to a white therapist, knowing that they will understand my culture. You know, I've gone through so many conversations as an activist where people have said, well, actually, my family do it differently. My family see it differently. And it's that cultural competency that I'm making or bringing to light right now. It's, you know, not confusing cultural competency with representation. Representation, I guess, gives gateway to trust. And, you know, like I said, maybe takes away isolation, but cultural competency gives you something a bit more enhanced, and it, you know, it allows people to be able to open up. And that's, you know, where what I got from cultural competency as I went through that journey in mental health. And, you know, now when I look at situations, I don't just see one side of that situation. I see it from every single therapist that I spoke to that was from a different background, from a different culture. That makes me realize, actually, maybe how I see it isn't how the person on my right will see it. And maybe the person on my right won't see it as the person on my left will see it. And so those two for me were something that I've always wanted to touch on. And I guess third as well, you know, is defining what a disability is, because actually a wise woman this morning said to me, it's hard to discuss something that is so nuanced in its message. And so really looking at, you know, defining what is a disability, because it's really down to interpretation. And again, that comes into cultural competency and representation, and how we look at all three together and how we understand all three together. You know, we can learn from each other is, I guess, the moral of my point, and we can understand more from various backgrounds. And that was what I wanted to introduce.
Thanks a lot, Antonio, for bringing this aspect and also the cultural aspect. Very strong, thank you. And Hannah, I'm directly going to you.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you, Antonio. So what I wanted to bring to the table is the crossover of physical health psychology and mental health psychology, because certainly in England, there is one or the other, and I can't access physical health psychology because that is for a chronic condition that could be helped. It's seen as a treatment program. So type 2 diabetes could be improved potentially by CBT. So I can't access those services. But then there aren't the practitioners with the expertise in the mental health service area of the crisis team and other things. They don't have any kind of training. There was a point, I've been shielding for 2 years, and I got ill 6 years ago, and my doctors have been waiting for the other foot to drop, so to speak, the other shoe to kind of. It would be a bit strange if you weren't diagnosed with a terminal illness and you weren't depressed about it, but I was like putting it off. It's fine, let's carry on. And COVID happened, and the news was, well, it only really harms disabled people. We don't really need to worry. And that played into my own internal ableism. And I needed a crisis team that would take me in as an inpatient in a COVID safe way, because I was a danger to myself. It got to that stage, but they couldn't provide that, both on the physical side of things. They didn't have the inpatient training to have someone with severe disabilities physical disabilities in their inpatient unit, but also I basically was Skyping with them every day. during that time, and they tried their best, but they didn't understand. They didn't have a education on the crossover of the two, because there are some things that it would be a bit strange you weren't upset about in like I've been given a drastically reduced life expectancy, but this isn't seen as a mental health thing, and there aren't the resources to catch those people and go, it's okay, let's work through this and see you through to the other side. So that was my point, really. It was there are people are living much longer because of medical advances. I'm still here because of medical advances. 10 years ago I wouldn't have, but we haven't caught up with the mental side of that. And medical procedures, I've had a lot, and often anesthetic doesn't take, and it's very traumatic. And it would be very strange if you didn't have mental health difficulties from that, but there aren't the resources, and that is a real gap in, I think, most systems of healthcare, because they never think that you can have more than one thing. So yes, that was all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hannah, for your input and for the strong message and the strength. You, but also all of the speakers today, and I believe all people in one way or another. So in everyday life, especially in these times of pandemic, it's very important. So thank you. Now I think we are back on track with also more than 200 people following us, which is amazing. And I'm very proud of all of you, because it seems that this session is interesting for people. And yeah, I believe it is. And now I will pass the floor to Dominic from Germany. So after UK with Antonio and Hannah, in the Netherlands with Clementine, we go to Dominic in the Germany. Dominic is a activist on mental health, advocate, also social interpreter, and many other things. Dominic, I will leave the introduction to you, as well the first statement of the day. Thank you and welcome.
Hi Camille, hi everyone, and what an amazing panel to be part of. And I haven't even met Sarah yet, so I'm really looking forward to her statement as well. I think we bring many aspects to the table that are so important around mental health. And like many of my co-speakers here, I'm a mental health advocate because of my own experiences with mental illness. And so you said it, I am a social entrepreneur, I'm a writer. I really love what you said about writing, Hannah. It is kind of therapeutic, but it really shouldn't stop there. But for me, it's also a very, very important part of my recovery journey. And my newest role is the one of a mother. I have a 9-month-old daughter. This is a whole new aspect of mental health I'm encountering there at the moment. And for today, what I would really like to state here, and what I think has been already in the messages of my co-panelists, is the great thing I think about mental health is that it unites each and every one of us. Because when you have a health, then you have a mental health. No matter your background, your religion, where you live, we all have a mental health, and this is the thing that unites us all. And if each and every one puts a little bit of power into it, then we can really do great stuff. And I also think this is the positive thing about this whole pandemic, that mental health has come more upfront, and many people are now more aware of it than ever. It has been important before the pandemic, and it will be important afterwards. But I really try to see the positive thing that many people who have washed away mental health early and said, well, it's not that important, have realized that it is important. And I think the other thing that we saw is that it's when the problem is there, then it's too late to act. We really have to think mental health in almost everything we do, like really the prevention part. I'm going to talk about that, why it's so important to me later as well. But that if we would have looked out for our mental health pre-pandemic, then maybe it would have not led to as many big problems as we are facing today. So, and this is the thing from my personal experience, where I can say prevention, early intervention would have helped me to not lose so many years to my mental illnesses. And this is really the thing I'm focusing on today, like really raising the awareness to get the prevention going. And I try to stop talking now. I'm very passionate about mental health, as you know, Camille. But I'm really looking forward to meet Sarah and to the rest of this panel. And thank you all. It's really amazing to be a part of this.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you for your excitement and for your message also about the prevention. And and I mean, I will also say something you didn't say, I think now, but you say very often, and I think it's nice to bring it to the webinar today, that mental health rocks. So I think it's in a way a very nice and positive message to see, things, the glass half empty and not half full. I'm sorry, oh boy, my English. Half full and not half empty. Okay, but now I'm going to our fifth and last speaker of the panel. Last but not least, Sarah Abu Ali. She is from Jordan, a strong activist in her region. And she does a lot of other interesting things. Sarah, welcome. Please introduce yourself and give us your first statement of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. مرحبا أنا سارة أبو علي.
Hello, I'm Sarah Abu Ali. I'm 28 years old from Jordan. I'm an activist in the rights of people with disabilities. I'm pursuing my higher studies in social work. I am specialized in working on an application for blind people, and this application covers several Arab countries. I'm responsible for initiatives for the education of blind people in Jordan and for deaf people also in Jordan. I try to break the stereotype about people with disabilities. So this stereotype says that these people, that they are people who are consumers, these are people who are unable to produce, they are a burden on the society, and these people are only there to take and not give anything. So I am here along with other people. So we are here in order to break this stereotype and change it about people with disability. People with disabilities are productive people who can help produce a lot of things, who can lead campaigns and can lead projects if they get the opportunity to do this, of course. So the main goal or the main subject I would like to talk about is the support, the psychological support of people with disabilities. So naturally, every person of us, whether they are people with disabilities or not, everyone needs psychosocial support. And in Jordan, it's not really accepted that people would go to get some psychosocial support. So what I would like to say that each person reaches a phase in their life when they are not able to give more and they need support. So as people with disabilities, we are more subject to this and we are more exposed to this because the challenges in our life are bigger and more difficult than people who are not people with disabilities. So what's more important here is that we always have to change the look or the perspective, how people look at people with disabilities. And here, people with disabilities have a role in changing this stereotype and changing this point of view, so other people can trust us and they can know that we can work, we can produce, we can study, and we can learn just like anybody else. Of course, if we get the opportunity for this and if we get all the accommodations for this. Moreover, there's the support of the parents. The support of the parents is very important for people with disabilities. And based on my experience, so I was born having a vision impairment, so I was blind. My mother, I had visual impairment, sorry. So my mother was my biggest supporter. My mother is helped me learn how to be more socially active. So my mother helped people look at me differently, help people look at me as a normal person, an equal person to everyone else. So it's important here to talk about the support of the parents to people with disabilities. We also have to try to give or to explain that mental health is something very important and everyone needs mental support and psychosocial support in their lives, whether they are people with disabilities or not.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for your first intervention. I like also the fact for bringing the role of support and also the role of families, which very often is crucial. So yeah, thank you for bringing this aspect. So now, after finishing the first round of this first very strong and diverse interventions from our speakers, and before we go to the second round, let me remind you that there is also interpretation in different languages on the bottom of your Zoom window in case you need it. So now we go to the second round of interventions. This time, each speaker will be given a specific question and a unique question. And yeah, apart of that, the process will be more or less the same. So I will start with Antonio, and I will ask that, Antonio, a lot of time, I mean, most of the time you speak a lot as an expert through lived experience, but do we know you are also studying psychology and cognitive neuroscience? So you are interested into this scientific approach. Could you briefly tell us about these two approaches on mental health and why are these important for you to, to go also to the scientific approach next to the lived experience? Thank you.
Yes, it's a really good question, as I've said to you before. And before I actually get into the story of how I got involved with it too, because that will explain a bit more. A lot of it, again, comes back to what I introduced in my first statement, which was looking at how representation can facilitate cultural competency, right? And only when we find the keenness to learn from each other can we understand each other. And so that creates a diverse and inclusive space, which comes back to wanting to be involved in a scientific approach and a lived experience approach. Having come out of a psychiatric ward, my recovery was facilitated heavily by the patients I was with during my time in a psychiatric ward. A lot of people say that you can't pour out of an empty cup. However, sometimes it's just us being oblivious to what's being poured out of that cup, not that it's empty. And so in learning from the other patients and understanding the other patients, understanding their cultures and how their mental illness was seen, it gave me inspiration, motivation to want to learn about psychology as a whole, understand mental health as a whole. And so when I was discharged from the psychiatric ward, I had this, determination, commitment, motivation to go and study psychology at university. And so, that's exactly what I done. I got into university and, just to add in, it wasn't a straight road from psychiatric ward into university. There were lots of ups and downs. So, I don't want it to appear it was just, a straightforward, smooth route into university and studying psychology. But fortunately, having now gotten here and studying what I've always wanted, what I had interest in, what had actually happened was my lecturer would say to me, Antonio, you need to find extra experience outside of your degree because your degree by itself won't be enough. The world of psychology is very competitive. And again, I'm grateful for it now, but at the time I wasn't seeing it as in such an appreciative way, but it was almost a way to get my lecturer off my back that I went and signed up to a mental health charity as a volunteer to just show her, look, I've done what you said, leave me alone, that sort of thing. But actually in doing that, it became bigger than what I'd expected and anticipated. The first opportunity that was sent to me as now a volunteer of a local mental health charity was to tell my story to an induction day of staff members a staff induction day of the organization. And I'd never spoken of my story, told my story in any public setting. And so, the one thing that drove me to doing it was, well, you signed up now and you always told yourself you're not going to give up at the first instance of any opportunity. And so I went and took the opportunity. And when I told my story, it was almost as if I had won the Olympics, really. Everyone was clapping, everyone said, your story is really powerful and you should really pursue it. And it could help a lot of other people in this situation. And that's when that light bulb moment came into my mind that actually maybe wanting to help other people won't just come from the scientific approach of studying psychology, but also from offering my lived experience for people to understand. And again, this is why I said I'm going to keep bringing this up, is that facilitation of representation and cultural competency. If there isn't enough people from diverse backgrounds speaking of it, learning about it, understanding it, and giving that back to others, then it will never come to know what is similar and what is different between each individual who goes through a mental illness or disorder journey. In that journey, we will all experience our disorders differently, but at some point we will all feel the same way. We will all feel the same emotions, the same feelings, right? We will feel happy, we'll feel sad. And so for me, it was initially crossing the two into actually, well, my lived experience is enough to support others, right? But outside of my lived experience, what do I actually know? How do I know how dopamine works? How do I know how serotonin works? It's not just about my own lived experience. And again, this is what I said, it's about learning or wanting to learn about others to be able to understand others. And that's where the two came together. And actually, they've been very helpful in my journey because, sometimes I sit in lectures and I learn about things in psychology and neuroscience. I refer back to my experience in the psychiatric ward or when I was in crisis. I think actually this makes a lot more sense to me now. I understand, because the problem was during the time in mental health services, you never had someone really educating you. All you had was someone taking care of you. And so what better way to understand and overcome something than to learn about it? And then what better way to use that than give back to others? And so that's where my interest in the two came, and maybe accidentally, but purposely came to me, and how, I use the two to, enhance and reflect on myself, but also support others, and again, give representation and emphasis on cultural competency.
Thank you, Antonio, for sharing this aspect and the importance of both personal and educational approach. It's very, I think it's important. Now, without further ado, because the time is flying and I kind of forgot to, sometimes, I'm so immersed in what you would say that, I don't look at the clock always. So, Hannah, you are a passionate writer and you love poetry. And in my small research, I found that you said that at some point that hugely important support network for you during the lockdown and afterwards was the writing squad. Could you tell us a bit more about it and how it was supportive to you? And yeah, and your mental health, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, so the writing squad is a writing group basically in the north of England, set up for young rising writers in the north. And it was really important to me in the pandemic because I was having my mental health crisis, and it was a place I could go every week and just be honest. And at the start of the pandemic, we didn't really know each other, but now we're amazing friends and still meeting every single week. And it was just something to grab onto. So it wasn't even about writing. It was about, yes, we have writing in common, but the world is really hard now, and let's talk about it. And I think mental health is an issue of inclusion. So like, before the pandemic, disabled people were systemically excluded purely because of a lack of imagination. And I think online events have given people who weren't able to get into an event because, say, it was up a flight of stairs, the ability to do that. And I really worried that that is rapidly disappearing, and we need to continue with online events such as this, as well as in person, because there has been three experiences of this pandemic. There's been the general experience, which has been lockdowns and other things depending on where you live. Then there has been the in England they're called extremely clinically vulnerable people like myself. I haven't left the house for 2 years. I didn't see my dad for 10 months, even though he lived in the same house because he was a fireman. Oh, and he just had to keep on getting people out of those fires. It was just so, no, I'm joking. He was doing his job really well. And, but it was really hard because I didn't see him for so long. And then the third experience was is the health practitioners themselves. And I think the same thing is going to happen for the health practitioners as it has for the people who have been shielding, in that I don't see much provision. And if you are a health practitioner or someone who's shielding, I would really encourage you to write, even if it's just a diary. Just get a temperature of where you are, like this is a mood temperature of where you are today, because you're not alone, but equally mental health can really creep up on you, certainly with medical trauma and things like that. So keep an eye, and writing is a great way to do that. And yeah, I worry about the pace at which it happened, right? We can do online events, this is amazing, and how quickly, as soon as in-person events were allowed back, certainly in the writing spheres, they've gone back to in-person, so I can't go. So it's you know, COVID has been horrific, particularly for disabled people, because they've been 60% of the deaths. And it's important that we don't make things accessible just to suit the abled population, because I asked to do a uni degree and they said, this was before the pandemic, that I couldn't do it online, and yet overnight, magically, they managed to do it during the pandemic. So I have a massive feeling that mental health is, in order to have good mental health, there's got to be inclusion, because if you're excluded, how are you supposed to have good mental health? How are you supposed to have those strong social bonds and those people to lean on when things get hard? So I know I wandered away from the question there, but I think writing is really important. Take a check of where you are, and also just keep an eye on people who probably won't say anything, but need it and need the online spaces, and keep them going, because we're finally getting a space to talk about these things, and it's important that those spaces don't vanish. So yes, that was me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hannah. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I mean, a lot of important points. I will keep what you said about important to have a good mental health. It's important to be included and have inclusion. I think it's a very strong message. And yeah, without further ado, I will go again to Clementine. And this time, I would like to ask you, I know that something that is important and high on your agenda for you is the various assumptions people make about the others, and the stereotypes, even the IQ discrimination. Please tell us a bit more, about it and why it is important for you.
Yeah, so I already talked about IQ a bit, so I'm gonna skip that for now. But yeah, so like I also have like the two sides, like I'm autistic. I had a lot of mental health problems from my past. I've been mentally abused in my past, and those kind of things, so like PTSD. And that creates a lot of problems, of course, like also in your later life. And then after I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so that's a connective tissue disorder, and it makes me sometimes be in a wheelchair, or sometimes use a walking stick, or sometimes just walking without any medical, what is it called? Like, yeah, that. And so that makes it so that I saw a lot of different sides of like ableism, saneism, and healthyism. So like in terms of systems, like I saw when I was in a wheelchair, I saw how people treated me. Like they petted me, they were just running to me, like asking really weird questions, but also infantilizing me, and saying like, oh yeah, you should have like a low IQ now because you have a physical disability or am in a wheelchair. And when I talk with other physically disabled people like me, they always say like, they have a statement like, no, I am physically disabled, but not mentally disabled. So people should treat me normally. And like, there lies a problem. There lies such a problem, because like we as various disabled people, like we try to avoid that we are seen as like, oh, we have a low IQ, or like we are dumb, or we are crazy, and those kind of things. Like it's okay to have one thing, but if you have another, it's not absorbed well, if I explain that well. And so that's a very big topic. Like also I went to a study session many years ago, and there were people with mental disabilities, but also in wheelchairs, people with speech impairments, blind people, deaf people. And what I really noticed is that there is such a hierarchy in activism and those disabled spaces, because like wheelchair users, for example, like we know what they have, we know, like it's normalized, and like it's, I don't know how to explain it. Like my head is a bit scrambled, I'm sorry. But yeah, so, but then like when we were in groups and talking about, we had to do a project, and then there was a person with speech impairment, and while everyone listened to everyone, to that person, they didn't listen because they said like, yeah, but he is slow, maybe he has a low IQ, so we shouldn't listen to it. And that really made me realize that even in activist spaces and disability community, that we always have saneism to watch out for, and always like we should never, yeah, we should always have this conversation. Um, yeah, I hope it makes sense. Yeah, my head is really, yeah.
Thank you, Clementine. It makes total sense. And yeah, thank you for bringing the aspect, I mean, many aspects again, but yeah, the hierarchies and, you know, how it's affecting, you know, each other and all these things. Now, I will move to Dominic again. And before that, I want just to say that I'm reading, you know, the comments on the chat and everything. After each of you, there is so many positive things and saying, I'm happy I stayed, I'm happy I'm here. Yeah, keep the good work. So yeah, I realize this is very important what we are doing at the moment. But okay, I stop talking. It's not about me, as we said. Dominic. So among many other things, like being advocate and writer, and you are a social entrepreneur. I think it is about a mental health cafe. If I'm correct, if not, please correct me. So please share us about this initiative and how it is relevant to the mental health well-being of you and your peers. Thank you.
Thank you again. Yes, so I never started out to be a social entrepreneur. When I started my whole mental advocacy thing a couple of years ago, I really just started with a blog, started writing about it. Then I started to go into schools, and it all kept on growing and growing and growing. And I guess one of the things that helped people relate to me was that I always tried to keep things light, to make it easy to deal with this topic of mental health, because for many people, mental health is still equivalent with mental illness. And that is not true. Mental illness is just a small part of mental health. And so I really try to encourage people and to show them, well, there is more to mental health, and we all have one. And we, as you say, for me, mental health rocks is a very important message to show people that we don't have to necessarily play the sad piano music and sit in a circle and cry our eyes out because we're talking about mental health. No, we can do it in a positive and a fun way. We can do it while having a cup of coffee or going out for a walk. So this was always important to me, and I think it resonated with many people. And so at one point, it was just not possible anymore for me alone to keep all this running. So we founded the Mental Health Crowd, and us being a social enterprise means we are on paper a normal enterprise, but for us it's not important to get rich or get lots of money, but for us the societal change, this is what's in the focus of our work. And we do lots of different things, and one of the things, as you mentioned, was that we opened up Germany's first mental health cafe. It was inspired by Sip of Hope in Chicago, and they were the first coffee shop around the world where all the proceeds go into mental health awareness and proactive suicide prevention. And I really like the idea so much that we opened up one here in Germany as well. And the idea behind it was really to give mental health a space, because you can't see mental health. And so with our cafe, we wanted to really to give it a space, to make it touchable, I would say, and to put it, we opened it up in the middle of Munich with huge windows, and we wrote "Mental Health Rocks" on there to really show the positive message, and to give the topic of mental health a place to go apart from when you have a crisis or when you go to therapy, just really for everybody to deal with it. We opened up in December 2019, so 3 months before COVID hit. In these months, so from December to March, we were overwhelmed by the success, by how many people came and really said, this is what we needed. This is really where mental health should be, in the middle of it all. But unfortunately, COVID broke our neck. We really tried to keep it open for around 20 months. We fought lockdown after lockdown. We didn't receive any funding from the government because our concept being so new, being so different, there was just not the right program for us. So a couple of months ago, we had to decide that we have to close it down. And it was really hard for us because we knew that, especially in these times, places like our mental health cafe are so desperately needed. And yeah, so this was for our mental health not very good, but we tried to see. It was not the idea that failed, it was the pandemic that failed, and we really hope that one day in the future we will set up a mental health cafe again. So we focused our work more on the education and the mental health literacy. So we work with schools, with universities, we work with other companies who are really willing to change something about mental health. And so our basic messages are really, we all have a mental health, but it cannot stop at mental health awareness. We also have to spread mental health literacy to give people the knowledge and the tools to deal with their mental health, whatever that might look like. And another message that's really important to us is this: we are in this together. We are not alone. None of us have to go through all of this alone. And it's really okay not to be okay, especially in times of a global pandemic, but also in just normal plain life. We all have our ups and downs, but we don't really talk about them. And really knowing that we're never alone. There are always people who are in similar situations, and there are always people who are able to help us. This is another important message that we, as the mental health crowd, try to put out there. And that was more than 3 minutes. I tried to keep it short. Back to you, Camille.
Thank you, Dominic. Yeah, don't worry. I mean, about the minutes. I mean, the messages are more important at the time. And we can always, be creative with the time. In the same way, you tried to be creative in a society without, the necessary approach to mental health, and you created, for example, the cafe. It was maybe not, the timing was unfortunate, not your fault, of course. COVID is, was unfortunate for many other people. But I mean, you continue, you do a lot of other stuff, and I am sure, and I wish to you that you open it again, and together with this that you will open, there will be even more similar around the globe cafes. And yeah, I will be the first one to go to yours one and to the other ones. So thank you. Now we'll go to Sarah, which will close the second round. And Sarah, so as we said, you are a strong activist on disability rights in Jordan and your region. And yeah, I would like to ask your personal view and your thoughts on how policy and legislation could facilitate, if available, the improvement of mental health of youth with disabilities. Yeah, I'm not sure, I mean, if there is or there is not, very much policy at the moment, but yeah, please share your views. By the way, you are muted. Perfect.
Sorry. يمكن أنت بلشت بالفكرة اللي أنا أصلاً بدي أحكي فيها. إحنا في الأردن لحد
Thank you, Camille. You've started with an important idea that I wanted to tackle myself. We enjoyed them when we talk about mental health issues for people with disability. It's very much absent, unfortunately. it's not very much known, and we don't have a lot of organizations that specifically work on this topic, especially when we talk about civil society organizations or NGOs. What they've recently been doing is that they started offering psychological support, but through short-term projects. So these aren't really long-term projects based on long-term visions. And whenever we talk about mental health support offered to people with disability, the support is often restricted to these individuals and not their family members. As someone who's an activist and who has gone through a mental health support, I think that an important element is to start by offering support to the family that's hosting this person with disability, because the family is the enabling environment that needs to be well prepared. And ready to cope with the person with disability. And the better the environment is, the more enabling it is, the easier the living conditions would be for the person with disability. In short, we're working on a lot of projects in that sense. We've been working on raising awareness about the importance of mental health, and on encouraging people to opt for these services if they feel that they need to. If they feel that they need mental health support, they should go for it. We've been trying to normalize that, even through the media. Another practice we've been trying to promote is collective support. Because as I've said, it should be a shared effort. It's not only something done by the person with disability, but also the whole family. I've worked on a similar project for a whole year, whereas we tried to rehabilitate spaces where people with disability may operate and work, to show everyone that with very simple practices that we all can do in our own environment, we can contribute to having this enabling environment in order to make sure that these individuals are autonomous. Because at the end of the day, this is the main objective, to make sure that everyone is autonomous and productive. So perhaps effectively speaking, the most important thing we can do in Jordan is to enact the law on people with disability that has been developed by Jordan as a signatory state to the relevant international convention. This is when it comes to the needed policies and regulations. Also in that sense, it's important to note that Jordan is one of the main signatory states to these international instruments. At the same time, in all centers offering support to people with disability, even in schools in general, or in hospitals, we can make sure that there is someone who would also assist us in that direction in promoting mental health. Also, we can work with families who include a member with disability, especially if they're just coping with this new reality. It would be good to help these families by making sure that in hospitals there are experts in mental health in order to prepare the family, especially when they have a newborn with disability, because I repeat, families are the space where the first line of support is offered. Based on my own personal experience, the family was the main source of support. And it's my parents who helped me adapt with the new reality. I can't lie. I mean, in some sometimes I would feel weakened, I would feel marginalized, I would feel hurt by some words addressed to me. And even though I cannot see others, I mean, I'm blind, but I would sense their judgment through their voice tone. And in a lot of cases, I would resort to my parents, to my family members, and also in school, I would seek help from the local school counselor. And perhaps it was the case till the age of 12. And I would think perhaps naively that this would be only the situation only in schools. But after moving on to another school, that's a mixed school, I had to deal with people who were coexisting with someone with disability for the first time. As a result, I felt sometimes marginalized and put aside. I would also feel afraid, and self-confidence was very much undermined, which has also affected me to a great extent. And this is due to the fact that we don't have enough awareness about the importance of mental health, especially the mental health of people with disability. After finishing school, I felt that as a young woman with disability, I need to be the voice of others in order to help them accept, for example, their children with disabilities and to promote their capacities, especially to break the taboo of disability, which is still very much existent in a lot of our communities. And I do know personal cases of parents who forcibly married their own girls with disability in order to free themselves from this stigma, because they would feel that having a daughter with disability is a source of shame or stigma. So unfortunately, sometimes the lack of the necessary level of awareness is leading to a lot of harmful practices against individuals with disability. At the same time, they're not aware that these practices return these individuals to either secluded individuals, very much isolated, or even harmful to themselves or to others, instead of actually benefiting from their other abilities. And they would often become quite negative, which would actually widen the gap and promote negative thoughts. So instead of being an enabling society, we become a negative, disabling society. So it's really important to emphasize the need for mental health services and support for the whole family, especially for us in Jordan, whereas we need to have the binding laws that make mental health services compulsory, especially for parents of newborns with disabilities. We need to have the proper implementation decrees related to these laws to make mental health services a reality. And finally, it's important to combat stereotypes. Another important aspect that we need to highlight is the fact that we do know that in some places they offer mental health support, but there aren't any guarantees for the rights of people with disability. So perhaps the main problem is the lack of media promotion and media coverage. We don't have enough media coverage for centers that offer mental health services and support. We know that we live in an era of social media, so it's really important to work on marketing these spaces. So not simply to make people aware of these spaces, but also to encourage people with disability to go there and to present the services offered by these spaces. And to highlight the equipment that exists in these centers and to make people understand that these are properly equipped places and ready to receive people. Because personally, for example, when I go to a space that is equipped with the Braille technology, I feel very much reassured. And I'm very happy because I feel that I will get an equal treatment like anyone else. So this is really an important aspect that we need to work on. Awareness raising, sensitization, and to make sure that there are specific spaces to host people with disability in mental health centers, especially in Jordan, because we still don't have enough information and knowledge about the importance of mental health.
Sarah?
And if you want to talk.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Everything you say is super important and, like everyone else, but unfortunately we are out of time. So I will ask you maybe to conclude. I mean, I will a bit more seconds just to, for your final message. I'm sorry for that, but.
لا it's okay. بس إنه المسج الأخير أو الرسالة.
My last message is that we have to try to work on internet space and the websites in order to make them accessible for people with disabilities to access them. So in Jordan, for example, we have lots of websites that are not friendly to people with disabilities. So these websites should become more friendly. So people with disabilities can access them and can help themselves while using them. And this way they can be useful also to others. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. And again, I'm sorry for having to stop you. I mean, it was super interesting and super important what you were sharing, like all the other messages. Unfortunately, we got over time, but all the messages were so important. So it was worth to listen to each of you. Normally, the agenda was now programmed. The idea was to have a third round on mental health and COVID, but because we are so over time, and because already some of the speakers addressed, the COVID impact on mental health and on their work, I would suggest we skip it in order to have a couple of minutes, maybe for questions from the audience. If all of the speakers agree with me, and yeah, I see so thumbs up from Dominic and nodding from Hannah and from Clementine as well. So I would go to the questions. It's so many the messages of you. We are more than 240 at the moment. That, to be honest, I lost the track. So I saw already some of the speakers replied direct to the questions, which is very helpful and very good. Thank you for that. And I will ask the colleagues from IDA if they have noted down any question that would be worth to bring to the discussion, or should we take the hands up?
Caroline, if you can unmute your.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, everyone. This is Team Caroline.
Yes.
Hello, I think the video is missing, but sorry. I'm a deaf. My name is Atim Caroline from South Sudan. The first thing, I want to thank you for sharing more about what is happening in the world about the disabled. But I think you're focusing more on the mental health. You're focusing more on the mental health, but we're trying to forget about today, the world more disabled. There are very many things that happen to the disabled. The deaf, the blinds have a lot of challenges. For example, now the world in the conflicted countries, there are so many rape cases, very many defilement, a lot of murder cases. So we should think about how we can also solve such issues, especially should make like a project for the human rights as the health, the mental health. We include also the deaf, blind, and other kinds of disabled. We should look on how we can solve all these in the conflicted countries, because also during time for the conflicts, it brings problem to their IQ, and some of them end up becoming mentally ill. So we should not focus more of about the mental health, but we should also think psychologically about the other disabled. Thank you. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank
Can
you.
I? Oh,
Yes, Clementine, please go ahead.
yeah.
Just
So
quickly, please.
yeah. So the topic today is mental health. So that's why we are trying, like talking more about mental health and other disabilities or the other systems. But yeah, I truly agree, of course, like what I tried also to say, like the intersections are so important to talk about. And like when we talk about sanism, we also talk about ableism, and the other way around. So yeah, I agree. And I think we as a disabled community should come together, and that we should inform ourselves, like even though like you have a physical disability, you should learn about like mental disabilities and about like sanism. Also the other way around, we should not stay in our own lane, and in our own privileges. We should use our privileges to also enhance other voices of the disabled community.
Thank you, Clementine. Exactly. I totally agree. Also, to say very briefly that the Global Disability Youth Summit, it's a whole day event with many different topics. Just before the one we had, there was one on employability, and before that, there was one on a humanitarian crisis. So, and afterwards, there will be other ones. And all of this cover, the different aspects, some of the aspects you probably have in mind. So please also, don't hesitate to follow the other sessions, and probably they will be uploaded also online afterwards in case you missed some. So with that in mind, I want to thank you, all of you, to participating today, joining us. It was really amazing to have so many of you following us. It shows how important it is, the topic of mental health for young disabled people, and in general for everyone. We get the message that we need to do it more, to address more the issue, and give more time to the topic. So we will give our best to do that next time, and to bring it again to the surface. I want to thank the interpreters, both of the sign language and of the language interpreters. I want to thank the captioners, the speakers, the excellent speakers. Each of you were amazing, and I'm really proud to be part of the session with all of you, and I learned so much from all of you. I want to thank also the audience, 243 people at the moment, probably more than 250 during the session. It's the most attended session I noticed today so far. So thank you for that. Thank you for showing your love to all of us. And thank you to the AIDA team and to the organizers for their hard work on these days and during the weekend and all the month. And to make this happen, making this possible. And there is an event 24 hours today from all different sessions throughout the world. So it's amazing. And I will close with with just a very small video of a couple of seconds, like in the similar session. In every session, we show a small video from the youth charter. And in our case, we show the call for action 9, which is about including all youth with disabilities, all genders, throughout an intersectional approach. Stay tuned to listen about the whole charter later. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone. And sorry for having to stop this so fantastic session. Thank you.
Action 8. Ensure quality inclusive education for everyone.
We recognize that youth with
Yes, I think we played this video in the previous session.
Global Disability Summit. Youth. Youth with disabilities. From holding rights to exercising them. Call for action. Preamble. We, the undersigned, actors in the field of human rights, development, and humanitarian action, by, with, and for youth with disabilities, welcome the extensive consultations and discussions held at the Global Disability Summit and the Global Disability Youth Summit. We affirm our commitments to ensure the participation of youth with disabilities at the global, regional, and national levels, in line with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, the 2030 Agenda, and its Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. We support the efforts of youth with disabilities, who have brought together their creativity, dynamism, versatility, and resilience, gathering in various online and in-person fora, to shape their priorities, in the follow-up to the first Global Disability Summit in 2018, and in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. We recognize that youth with disabilities, and their representative organizations, bring critical experiences, from the local to the global levels, and across multiple areas and languages, and can play a prominent role in the disability rights arena, and the larger youth movement. Action 9. Include all youth with disabilities, of all genders, through an intersectional approach.
We recognized that many youth with disabilities experience intersectional discrimination, which creates systemic patterns of social exclusion and vulnerability, and often compounds their exclusion and deprivation, particularly in the case of young women with disabilities and youth with disabilities that are poor, indigenous, LGBTQI, or belong to ethnic minorities, migrants communities, or other marginalized groups. We commit to advocate for an intersectional approach to the rights of youth with disabilities and to inclusion and equality as an underlying principle of our work.